All right, so you really want to get into the nitty-gritty of something, right? Like learn as much as you can, as fast as you can.
That's the whole point. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's what we're all about here. And today, we're diving into something pretty interesting. It's the Chris Report by Mick Hart.
Oh, yeah. Heard of that.
Yeah, it's essentially like a father's notes on his son's journey into competitive bodybuilding.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the son, Chris, went from like deciding to compete to actually being on stage in like a year.
Wow, that's pretty fast.
Yeah, it is. And the report is more than just like workouts and diet plans.
Right. It's got to be more than that for such a huge transformation.
Right. It's like his dad's observations on Chris's dedication, the methods they use, and even the mental part of it all.
So it's almost like a really personal look at this whole process.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to like dissect this report and pull out the really important stuff, the things that explain how Chris was able to do it so fast, and the thinking behind it all. And even if you're not into bodybuilding, stick with us because there's a lot to learn about commitment, smart planning, and how everything works together to reach a big goal.
I think that applies to pretty much anything you want to achieve, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So where do we even begin with this? It's a whole year's worth of stuff.
Well, a good place to start is actually with Chris as a kid.
Okay, so like background stuff.
Yeah, because the report actually highlights how determined Chris was from a really young age.
So he's always been like this, even as a kid.
It seems that way. His dad even mentions how Chris was born with dislocated hips, but was still like super resilient.
Wow.
Yeah. And growing up around his dad's home gym definitely played a role too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Always being around weights and stuff.
Yeah. And he got into boxing and kickboxing super young, like even before he was 5.
Wow. Starting young.
Yeah. And it sounds like that kind of gave him a taste for seeing results quickly, but his dad was patient.
Right. You can't force these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He understood that bodybuilding would come when Chris was ready.
Yeah.
So yeah, it wasn't forced or anything. It was all natural.
And that probably makes a big difference in the long run when you're actually motivated to do it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so fast forward to Chris, around 20 years old.
Okay.
And that's when a few comments about his physique kind of sparked his interest in competing.
For like some positive reinforcement.
Yeah, it seems like a few compliments were all it took.
That's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah, and his dad's reaction was perfect. He basically said, if you're serious about this, let's make a plan.
Love that.
Yeah, and at this point, Chris was around 168 pounds, and they had about a year to get ready for a competition.
A year to go from just starting to competing.
Well, it's worth mentioning that Chris already had some experience. He was a qualified Olympic lifting and weight training coach.
Okay, so he had a good base.
Right, he knew his stuff. But applying that knowledge to bodybuilding was where his dad's experience came in.
Yeah.
And their initial strategy was actually pretty simple. His dad calls it a simple yet extremely effective 3-day total body mirror training system.
Mirror training. What's that all about?
It's basically all about learning to see and feel your body working.
Oh, okay. That makes sense, especially for beginners.
Yeah, and this initial program had 2 different approaches each week. So week 1 was all about heavier weights with fewer reps.
Okay.
Think exercises like bar presses behind the neck, squats, lat pull-downs, flat bench press barbell curls, prone triceps, and standing calf raises.
Sounds like the basics.
Yeah, pretty much all the fundamental movements.
So like how many sets and reps?
Typically 3 to 4 sets of 6 to 12 reps.
Got it.
Then week 2 shifted to lighter weights and a faster pace.
Okay, so more of a pumping style.
Yeah, exactly. This week included exercises like dumbbell lateral raises, vertical rows, thigh extensions, leg curls, incline dumbbell press, lat pull downs, to the back-seated alternate dumbbell curls and dumbbell French press.
Okay, quite a bit more variety in that week.
Yeah, and they usually did 3 to 4 sets of 10 to 15 reps for those exercises.
And what about day 3 of the training?
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Day 3 of each week was the same as day 1.
Oh, okay, so they repeated the heavier routine.
Yeah, which makes sense for consistency and reinforcement.
Yeah, for sure.
But here's the thing that really stood out to me. They stuck with this basic system for 4 months straight.
Wow, 4 months without changing anything.
Yeah, no changes at all. His dad is really adamant about this.
Well, people love to jump around between different routines.
Yeah, they get impatient and want to try the latest thing they see in a magazine.
Which often leads to overtraining or just not making progress.
Exactly. And this 4-month period was all about building that solid foundation.
Right, master the basics first.
And the idea was to kind of shock the body by alternating between those heavier, lower rep workouts and the lighter, higher rep sessions.
So each week was a different type of stimulus.
Yeah. The heavier week was about pushing as much weight as possible with good form, and the lighter week was all about stimulating muscle growth.
Through that increased blood flow and metabolic stress.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the training side of things. Now what about the diet? How was he fueling all of this?
Yeah, so the diet during those first 6 months was all about high-quality protein and carbohydrates.
So pretty standard bodybuilding fare.
Yeah, pretty much. But the key here was consistency. He ate 6 meals a day every 3 hours.
Wow, that's dedication. Eating that often.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
And to give you an idea of what that looked like, breakfast was oatmeal scrambled eggs.
Oh, so like a classic breakfast.
Yeah, usually with lean bacon too. And he supplemented with amino acids, zinc, vitamin C, and creatine.
Okay, so a pretty nutrient-packed breakfast.
Then mid-morning was a whey protein shake with a banana and some rice cakes.
Easy and quick. Makes sense.
Then lunch was typically chicken or steak with pasta and vegetables,
Okay,
plus a salad and more amino acids.
so keeping that protein intake high throughout the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And mid-afternoon was basically the same as the mid-morning snack, sometimes of some pineapple added in.
Okay.
Now, during his workouts, he'd drink water with glutamine, creatine, and a little bit of sugar-free orange juice for flavor.
Gotta make it palatable, right?
Yeah, and then right after training, he'd have another whey protein shake.
Smart timing.
Dinner was usually lean ground beef or steak with a potato and salad.
Keeping it simple?
Yeah, and before bed, he'd have another protein drink and a small snack like Brazil nuts.
So just to make sure he was getting enough protein before going to sleep.
Yeah, pretty much. And there are a few other important things to mention about the diet. He drank 2 to 3 liters of water every day.
Which is essential for anyone, really, but especially when you're training that hard.
Yeah, for sure. And they didn't completely eliminate salt, but they controlled how much he was using.
Okay, interesting. And was there anything else?
Yeah, one more thing. They really emphasized steak over chicken.
Really? Why is that?
Well, it's based on the belief that steak provides more power.
So more of an intuitive thing rather than scientific?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting how those kinds of beliefs can come to play, even with a regimented plan.
Yeah, it definitely shows how personal experience can influence things. Now, the report also talks about the use of steroids.
Oh yeah, that's a big part of the bodybuilding world.
Yeah, for sure. And Mick Hart is very open about their use, but he's also very clear that Chris's hard work and belief in himself were the most important factors.
Right, the steroids aren't magic, they just help.
Exactly, and they started with 2 6-week cycles of oral steroids only.
Okay, what were they using?
So it was Dianabol, which helps with muscle growth, and stanozolol, which is also known as Stromba.
Right,
And they also use Nolvadex to help with any potential side effects from the steroids.
makes sense.
Yeah, and they gradually increased the dosages each week and then tapered them off.
And what was the reasoning behind that?
Well, they believed in using the minimum effective amount. They didn't want to overdo it.
Smart.
Yeah, and he even mentions being surprised by how much progress Chris made during those initial cycles.
Wow, that's impressive.
Okay, so after about 3 months, they switched up the training schedule.
Oh, how so?
They moved to a 3 days on 1 day off routine.
Okay, so increasing the frequency.
Yeah, but they still kept that 3-day split with different muscle groups each day.
Right.
And that day off wasn't just for resting either.
Oh, what do they do on that day?
It included a full-on aerobic workout, mainly using a punch bag.
So keeping the cardio up even on rest days.
Yeah, and they also encouraged some light bag work on the training days, too.
Interesting. Why was that?
I think it was mostly to help keep his metabolism revved up.
Right.
So the 3-day split itself also became more defined.
Okay, tell me more.
Day 1 was all about biceps, triceps, and abs.
Okay.
They did exercises like concentration curls and barbell curls for biceps,
Right.
and French presses and push downs for triceps, plus specific exercises for the abs.
Makes sense. What about day 2?
Day 2 targeted the quads, hamstrings, and calves.
So leg day.
Yeah, exactly. They
Right.
did squats, leg presses, lunges, stiff leg deadlifts, leg curls, and calf raises.
It's all a major muscles.
Yep, and they included some ab work on that day as well.
Okay, what about day 3?
Day 3 was dedicated to chest, back, and deltoids.
Okay, so like upper body push and pull.
Yeah, they did dumbbell presses and flies for chest lat pull downs and barbell rows for back and various exercises for the shoulders.
It's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, and they always finished with the abdominal routine.
So they were hitting abs every single day.
It seems that way.
Wow.
Then after about 6 months, Chris decided to transition to injectable steroids.
Okay, so switching from the oral forms.
Yeah, and they started a combination of Sustanon, decaprynabol, and Winstrol injections.
Okay.
Plus, they continued using oral Nolvadex and later added in Proviron.
Which is another compound used in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And did they change anything with their dosages or frequency with the switch to injectables?
Yeah, they did. I won't go into all the
Yeah.
specifics, but the report lays it all out pretty clearly.
Okay.
And it's interesting, they even tried testaviron and anthate for a bit.
Which is another form of testosterone, right?
Yeah, but they switched back to Sustanon because Chris was having some nipple soreness.
Oh, wow. So they had to adjust based on how his body was reacting.
Yeah, exactly. They were constantly monitoring and making changes when necessary.
Smart. It's not just about sticking to a plan no matter what. You got to listen to your body.
For sure. Okay, so now let's talk about the final 3 months before the competition.
This is where things get really serious.
Yeah, this is when the focus was all about getting Chris into peak condition for the stage.
Right.
He was around 182 pounds at this point, and they wanted him to be 175 for the competition.
So a decent amount of weight to cut?
Yeah, and that's when the diet got even stricter.
How so?
Well, they completely cut out full-fat milk and replaced it with skimmed milk.
Okay.
And they switched from pasta to boiled rice as the main source of carbs.
Interesting. And what about protein?
They still ate steak, but chicken and turkey, along with egg whites, became the main protein sources.
Makes sense. And anything else they added or removed?
Yeah, this is kind of funny. They added pickles to his diet.
Pickles? Why pickles?
Well, they can be high in salt, but they figured they could manage any water retention and shed it later.
Oh, okay. Interesting strategy.
Yeah. And the training also got a lot more intense.
Like how much more intense?
He was waking up at 6 in the gym by 7, and then working on his house after that.
Wow, that's a packed schedule.
Yeah, and his dad really stressed the importance of monitoring his energy levels.
Yeah, especially with the restricted diet.
Yeah, and they even told him to stop playing soccer.
Really?
Yeah, to save all those carbs for his weight training.
Wow, that's hardcore.
Yeah, but it was all about prioritizing his goals.
Right.
And his dad was also really adamant about getting enough rest.
Yeah, so many people overtrain when trying to lose weight.
And that can lead to muscle loss, which is the opposite of what you want.
Exactly.
So yeah, he was constantly reminding Chris to rest and recover properly.
Okay, so then we come to the final 6 weeks before the competition.
Yeah, this is what they called the pre-competition training system.
Okay.
Chris was understandably nervous at this point.
Yeah, I bet. All that work coming down to this.
And the goal was to hit that 175-pound mark while being in the best shape possible. And the training became incredibly specific. They had both morning and afternoon workouts for 3 days each week.
Wow, so twice a day training.
Yeah. They called this the fine-tune system.
I bet it was intense.
Oh, yeah, it was. Day 1 in the morning was calves, abs, and delts using supersets.
So doing one exercise right after the other with no rest.
Yeah. And then day 1 in the afternoon was all about quads.
Okay, what were they doing?
Heavy squats and leg presses, followed by lunges and practicing posing.
So working on those poses is important too.
Yeah, definitely, especially in the final weeks.
Makes sense.
Then day 2 morning was calves, abs, and biceps.
Okay, so hitting those smaller muscle groups.
Yeah, they did different types of curls and some forearm exercises.
Right.
And day 2 afternoon was chest and hamstrings.
Okay.
So chest exercises like presses and flies, and hamstrings with exercises like stiff leg deadlifts and leg curls.
Okay. Was there anything specific about those exercises?
Yeah, they really focused on stretching the muscles and maintaining perfect form.
Makes sense. Quality over quantity at this point.
Exactly. Then day 3 morning was calves and triceps.
Okay.
This workout was all about getting a pump, and they used shorter sets.
Okay.
And day 3 afternoon was back and rear delts,
All right.
with a big emphasis on stretching the lats.
Okay, so they're stretching a lot during these final weeks.
Yeah, it seems so. And during these last few weeks, they also added in a small amount of growth hormone.
Okay.
It was just 2 IUs every other or third day.
And why was that?
The main reason was to help with fat loss while maintaining muscle mass.
Right.
And this was all done alongside Winstrol and Viramone.
Okay, so stacking different compounds.
Yeah, and for the final 6 weeks, they used Winstrol, Viramone, Deca, and they added in Pronabol for the last 3 weeks.
Okay, quite the cocktail there.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they specifically avoided using diuretics.
Really? Most bodybuilders use those to shed water weight before a competition.
Yeah, but they decided to skip them.
Huh, that's interesting. Seems like they were going for a more natural look.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the actual show.
Yeah, the big day. Chris was super anxious about his body fat levels.
Yeah, I can imagine all that work and then the pressure of the show.
Yeah, but his dad reassured him that everything would be fine.
Right. Trust the process.
Yeah, exactly. And they did the typical water and salt manipulation in the days leading up to the show.
Which is pretty standard practice in bodybuilding to look your best on stage.
Yeah, and it obviously worked because on the morning of the show, Chris was in fantastic condition.
Awesome.
Yeah, he was lean and defined, and his dad said he almost cried.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and his mom definitely did cry.
It's so sweet.
Backstage, the competition was fierce. There were like 15 guys in his category.
Wow, that's a lot.
But Chris, being the youngest at only 21, held his own.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and he ended up placing second in the first-timers competition.
Wow, second place. That's incredible.
Yeah, and the winner was 36, so Chris was up against some experienced guys.
That makes it even more impressive.
And the second-place finish qualified him for the British Championships.
Wow, so he was going up in the world.
Yeah, he was. And the crowd was super supportive, and they celebrated like crazy afterwards.
I bet they did.
Yeah.
So looking back at this whole journey, what were the key takeaways? What made Chris so successful?
Well, there are a few things that stand out. First, his belief in himself and his dedication were huge.
Yeah, that's got to be the foundation, right?
Yeah, for sure. And that was backed up by a super well-planned training program.
Which they adjusted over time as needed.
Yeah. And his diet was also crucial.
Yeah, all that food prep and eating 6 times a day.
That's commitment right there.
For sure. And of course, we can't forget about the steroids.
Right, but remember his dad always stressed that those were just tools to help him achieve his goals.
Right.
And his dad was also big on listening to your body.
Yeah, they had to make some adjustments along the way, like when they switched steroids.
Yeah, and they really emphasized the importance of rest and recovery.
Which a lot of people neglect.
Yeah, for sure. And they had this saying that I really liked. It was, read, understand, personalize, dedicate, and enjoy.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that you need to understand what you're doing, personalize your approach, commit to it, and find a way to enjoy the process.
Exactly. And even though the specifics of Chris's program might not be right for everyone, the underlying principles are universal.
Totally. And Mick Hart even offered personalized consultations, which just shows that expert guidance can be super valuable.
Definitely.
So even if you're not into bodybuilding, there's a lot to learn from this.
Yeah, like how to set a big goal,
Right.
make a plan, and see it through.
Exactly. It all comes down to defining what you want, figuring out how to get there, and being willing to put in the work.
No shortcuts.
Nope, none at all.
Awesome. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the Chris Report,
Yeah.
we've seen how structured training, disciplined eating, and unwavering belief help Chris achieve amazing results in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring.
It is. And it really gets you thinking about how these same principles could be applied to your own goals.
Whatever those goals might be.
Exactly. It's not just about physical transformations. It's about the mindset and having a system.
So here's something for you to think about. Which of these elements speaks to you the most? Is it the belief, the structured action, or the attention to detail?
Good question.
Yeah. And maybe even more importantly, where can you improve? How can you strengthen those other areas?
Right. It's about finding your weaknesses and working on them.
And I think adopting that no-nonsense approach that's all over this report can help you cut through all the noise and make real progress.
Whatever your personal stage might be.
Exactly.
Awesome stuff.
Yeah, really interesting stuff for sure.
Well, thanks for breaking it all down.
Yeah, of course. Always happy to deep dive into these fascinating stories.
Until next time, man.